Hey everyone, welcome back to Driple Studios. In today's Roblox scripting tutorial, we're going to create an advanced purchasable zone system. This system will allow players to go up to a wall, touch it, and purchase the next zone if they have enough money. I'll also cover saving and loading these walls. I'm just going to have the player buy the wall when they touch it, but if you want to have a GUI that appears when the player touches the wall asking them to buy it, don't worry because I'm going to make a second part covering that in a few days' time. I will link it in the description when it is released. Let's get into it. So I do already have a few bits in my workspace here, so let me open that up. So I've got a spawn location, that's just standard. I've got a desert, grass and winter area. Now these are basically zones, so I'm going to have a wall in between each of these, which the player will be able to buy using cash. Also have points, so if I open up the grass area, I've got points in here, and this just contains 6 points, which each give 100 cash. You can pause if you want the script for this. I also have one in the desert where each point gives 500 cash. I don't have anything in the winter, but that's just because I don't have another door here. I also have a group of terrain parts in each of these, which is just the terrain on the outside, so we don't need to worry about it. Now I'm assuming you already have your own areas, so let's just get straight into it. Let's start with the Leaderstats. So in server script service, I'm going to add a script, which I'll just rename that to Leaderstats. And in here, let's get the players service. So players equals game::get_service players. Players.playerAdded::connect function passing in the player that joins. So this function's called each time a player joins the game. I'm not going to go too in detail with this script. If you want a full explanation of Leaderstats, please check out my Leaderstats video. You can find a link in the description. Local Leaderstats equals instance.new folder inside of the player. And Leaderstats.name equals Leaderstats, all in lowercase. Now let's create a cache value. Local cache equals instance.new int value inside of the Leaderstats. Cache.name equals cache. Okay, now we can close this. We'll come back to it shortly. Let's actually design the doors now. So I'm going to design a quick door. I'll get back to you once I've done it and I'll explain what I've done, just to save a bit of time designing. Here we go. So this is my little door here. So a brief explanation of what I've done. I've created a part named HitPart. And this is the part the player can see here. It's this grey part. I've just set a transparency of 0.1, made it dark grey. And then on here I've added a surface GUI. Now when you add a surface GUI, it may appear on maybe the top or the back. To get it on the right side, you may have to click on the surface GUI, and where it says face in the properties, you may have to play around with this until you get it on the face you want, which for me is the front. I've then added a text label named title, which just says the name of the next area, in my case desert, just given it a size of 0.20, and the price I've given a size of 1010, and this just says in text the price. Now it may be a little bit small. By default, if you're putting the maximum size of 100 on these and you have something the size of my HitPart, then on your surface GUI by default it's going to look like this. It's quite small. But you can click on the surface GUI in the properties and change the pixels per stud to make it a bit larger. Although do note this loses a bit of quality. If you want it to be perfect, you're better off making image labels. But 30 does look good. You can't tell that it's lost any quality there. I'm now going to add to the hit part a int value, and I'll rename this to cost. This will be the cost of the door. So the desert door is going to cost $600, 600 cash, because each point is worth 100 cash here, and I've got 6 of them, so I can get 600 cash. I'm not going to worry about updating the price text, and the reason for that is I'm going to add a script into the price, and we'll change it in here. So text label equals script.parent. We'll get the hit part as well, which is text label.parent. And we'll get the cost, which will be hit part, wait for child, cost. Then we can say text label.text equals the $sign, and then I'm going to concatenate to that the cost.value to get the value of the cost and add it to this string. Now bear in mind I've grouped the hit part into a new model called wall. I'll get onto the invisible part in a second. I've got a hit part and an invisible part, and it's all in a group named wall, which is inside of the desert. It's very important you keep the wall of the area you want to unlock in the area that you want to unlock. So for example, we want to unlock the desert, so we're going to keep the desert wall in the desert group. Now I'm going to add a script into the title, same thing again. So text label equals script.parent. And now we need to get the area. So we'll say area equals text label dot parent. So text label is the title, the parent's the surface GUI, the parent of the surface GUI is the hit part, dot parent again is the wall, dot parent again for the fourth time is the actual desert area. And then we can say text label dot text equals area dot name. That's why it's very important that you have the name of the outmost model, the area, as the name of the area. So we need this to be desert because the title text is changed to this name here. So if this is not desert, this won't be desert. Now I have also got this invisible part. This is just a part with transparency of 1. It's got can collide on and it's all anchored and it just stops the player being able to jump over the wall in some way. That's all that part does. So it covers the exact same area. If I made the transparency 0, you can see it's just one massive part, but it just stops the player jumping over the door here. Okay, now I'm going to add a script into the hit part, which I will rename to handler. And this is where we're going to handle what happens when the part is hit. We'll get the player's service again. So players equals game : get service players. And we'll also get replicated storage. Replicated storage equals game : get service replicated storage. We'll also get the hit part and store that in the variable. So HitPart Script.parent. That's just for easy access. And we also want the cost. So cost is HitPart : wait for child cost. Now inside of replicated storage, we're going to add in a remote event. We'll rename this and we'll call it hide wall. Just like this. And we'll use this to hide the wall on the client side later on. So then we can say hide wall re for remote event equals replicated storage : wait for child hide wall. Now let's say HitPart.touched : connect function hit. So this function's called whenever the hit part, which is the actual door, the wall, is touched. Hit is the part that touched it. So normally that will be the player's right arm, their left arm, their right leg, or their left leg. So we need to get the player's character from that. So to get the player's character, we'll do hit.parent. But we need to check if the player's character actually exists. So to do that, we can just check if the player exists. So we'll say local player equals players : get player from character, and we can do hit.parent. Now, if it wasn't a player that touched it, and maybe it was just a part, maybe one of these point parts, then hit wouldn't have a parent. It would just be that part. So player would be null or nil. So we can say if player then, because if player's nil, this is never going to run. So we won't get an error, just our code won't run. So this is just checking if the player exists. Now we need to check if the leader stats exist. So to do that, let's get the leader stats. Local leader stats equals player : find first child leader stats. And if the leader stats exist, we want to check if the cache exists. This is all about making sure everything's loaded in, just to make sure there's absolutely no errors that can occur. Check if cache exists. Local cache equals leader stats : find first child cache. If cache then. Now this cache here, the find first child cache with the uppercase C, must be the exact same as you've spelt it here in the Leaderstats script. Now let's check if the player has enough cache. So if cache.value is greater than or equal to cost.value, because remember cost is our int value in here, we need to check if the wall variable exists. We need to create some wall values. We need a walls folder, which is going to hold a variable for each wall. Basically, we're going to store a Boolean variable, a true or false value, inside of the player for each wall. So I'm going to have a wall for the desert and a wall for the winter area. I'm going to have 2 walls. So let's create this walls folder. So this will be equal to instance.new folder inside of the player, and the name, walls.name, will just be equal to walls. And the idea is these values will be set to true if the player has purchased the door. And we'll use this to save all the data. So we'll say local desert equals instance.new all value inside of walls, and desert.name equals has desert. Very important you name it just like this, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So has all in lowercase, and then desert, the beginning of that starts with an uppercase. Basically, this desert should be the exact same name as this here. And I will copy that, drop down and paste it in, and change this one to winter. And this will be has winter. Notice how my third area is called winter here. Again, the same part, same name here. Now we can actually close the Leaderstats script. I was actually getting one step ahead of myself. We want to check if the walls folder exists before we check if the wall exists. So say local walls equals player, colon, find first child, walls. If walls then, again, this walls should be spelled exactly how it is in your Leaderstats script. Then we need to check if the wall variable exists. Local wall equals walls, colon, find first child, purchased name. And now at the very top, we'll add a new variable. We'll say purchase name equals has HitPart parent.name. Now you're probably thinking, what is this doing? Let's have a look. So the purchase name will be, remember we had the name has desert in our Leaderstats script here. Has desert, lowercase has, and then desert starts in uppercase D. Here we're saying has, and then HitPart dot parent is the wall, dot parent is the desert, dot name. So desert, so we've got has desert. We could actually print here the purchase name. Now when we hit play, it will print has desert. And this should be the exact same as if we open up players, our player, open up the walls, and has desert here. So this in the output should be the exact same as this value here. Also, I've just noticed in the script in our price, we want textlabel.parent.parent for the HitPart because the textlabel.parent is the surface GUI. So we want to do .parent again to get the HitPart. So now we can say if wall then, so if the wall exists, we'll set wall.value to true because we now own the wall. Cache.value minus equals cost.value because we want to subtract the cost from the amount of cache we have. Now we need to hide the wall on the client. To do that, we'll say hide wall remote event, colon fire client, passing in the player we want to fire the client on, and HitPart.parent. The reason we're passing in HitPart.parent is because we want to pass in the wall model. HitPart.parent is the wall model because we're going to play around with the wall model from the client side. So we can now close the handler. And inside of starter player scripts under starter player, add a local script. This needs to be inside starter player scripts, not starter character scripts. I will rename this to wall handler. And in here, let's get the players service, the replicated storage service, and the hide wall remote event as well. So local players equals game, colon get service players, and local replicated storage equals game, colon get service replicated storage. Local hide wall remote event or RE equals replicated storage, colon wait for child hide wall. We'll also get the player, local player equals players dot local player. We can do local player, players.local player in a local script, but not in a server script. Then let's also get the walls folder inside the player, local walls equals player, colon wait for child, walls. Now let's create a function to hide everything that we need to inside the wall. So we'll say function hide wall, passing in the wall that we're going to hide. So the wall will be the wall. Okay, not the hit part or the invisible part. It's going to be the wall model. So out of this, we want to hide the transparent, we want to hide the hit part and want to hide the invisible part. So let's get those. So local hit part equals wall, colon wait for child. It won't auto fill for you here. You're going to have to type it out manually. Hit part. Make sure you're spelling everything correctly as well. Local invisible part equals wall, colon wait for child, invisible part. And it needs to be spelled exactly how it is in the Explorer. We can then say HitPart.transparency equals 1. HitPart.canCollide equals false. And we'll say invisible part.canCollide equals false. And we can say HitPart.surfaceGUI.enabled equals false. And this will hide all the GUI on the door. Now underneath this function, we'll say repeat wait until player, colon find first child, data loaded is not equal to nil. And we'll get onto what this means in a minute, but when we save the data and load it in, so when we load the data, we're going to put a new value inside of the player named data loaded, which will just tell the client that the data has fully loaded. So then when the data is loaded, then we can check if the wall is owned when the player joins. So we'll loop through each wall in the player's walls folder, and if the value is true, then they already own the wall. So for I, wall in pairs, walls : get children, do if wall.value is equal to true, then local name equals string.sub, I'll explain this in a second, wall.name, for, hashtag wall.name. So this will get a substring of our wall name. So if the wall name has desert, because by wall it just means the name of whatever value is inside the player. So it will be has desert or has winter for me. So if it's has winter or has desert, we want to sub from the fourth character in, so the D, and we want to go up to the length of the string. That's what the hashtag means. It means number of. So we want to go to the length of the string. So this will get a substring from has desert, which will say desert. So we can actually print name here. I'll just show you that. Actually, that won't load because of this repeat. Let me just comment that out. And because these are true, it won't print either. So let me just make that false. None of them are true. There we go. It says desert and winter. So that's how we know it works. Anyway, I'll make that true again, and I will uncomment this out, remove that print statement, and we'll also get the area. So local area equals workspace, : find first child, name. So in the workspace, we've got the areas, desert, grass, and winter. These are all in the workspace. We want to find the specific area. So in my case, whatever the name is here, we want to find that in the workspace. So that's why I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to make it automatic. If you have your desert, grass, and winter, or whatever areas you have in a folder, so you've got workspace and then a new model named areas, and then inside that you've got all these, then you do workspace.areas : find first child, for example. We can say if area then, so if the area actually exists, we'll say hide wall, area.wall. And this will just pass that wall into the hide wall function. Now let's just hide the individual walls. So this will just hide all the walls when the player first joins. So when the data is loaded, this hides whatever walls the player's already collected before. What we'll do here is hide the specific wall when the player buys it. So we'll say hide wall, remote event, dot on client event, connect function, passing in the wall, hide wall, passing in the wall. And that's it. Now if we close the wall handler, all that's left now is the data store. But first I will just go into our desert and duplicate this wall and drag it into the winter area. And just get the move tool and just move it forward so it's in line with the winter. Open this up and all I'll do is change the costs. So I've got 6 points here. These are all worth 500 cash. So 6 times 5 is 30. So I'll make this 3,000. Now I don't need to worry about the texts because they'll be updated automatically. Now let's add the data store. So add a script and rename this to data store. Now I'm not going to explain any of this code, and the reason for that is I've got a video on data stores. If you want a more in-depth explanation of exactly what's going on, please check that video out. I'm just doing this to purely save time. So we'll get the player service, local player service equals game : get service players. We'll also get data store service, local data store service equals game : get service data store service. And we'll also get the replicated storage. Replicated storage equals game : get service replicated storage. I'll now get a data store, so local data store equals data store service : get data store. And I'll just call this tutorial. Now let's get our default data. So local default data equals a new table. And in this table we'll have cache by default is equal to 0. And we also have our wall data. Has desert will be false by default. And has winter is also false by default. You want to make one of these for each one of these we have, basically. So if you had another one which said has lava or something, you'd make another one here which says has lava equals false. Put a semicolon after it or a comma. So this is our default data. This is what the data is by default if we've never loaded any or saved any before. Now we're going to paste in this function, which will be in the description. This is found on the Roblox documentation. and it just creates a deep copy of the table. Again, I explained it more in detail in my data store video, but for now, just paste that in. And now let's create a function to save data. Local function save data, passing in the player. We'll say local success, comma, error message equals pcall, protected call, function. And in here, we'll get the local data to save equals a new table. In here, we'll have player.leaderstats.cache.value. This is the actual data we are saving. We'll have player.walls.hasDesert.value and player.walls.hasWinter.value. This needs to be the same order as this. Now I'll say data store colon set async, passing in the player.user ID and the data to save. And then after the p call, we can say if error message, then error message, just to sort of display that as an error in the output. Now when the player joins the game, we'll say player service.player added connect function, passing in the player, local success, comma, error message equals pcall function, and in this function we'll say local data equals data store colon get async player.user ID. If data is nil, then data equals deepCopy of the default data, data store equal colon set async player.user ID and the default data. Now after this if statement, we want to actually load the data. So local leaderstats equals player colon wait for child leaderstats, and local walls equals player colon wait for child walls. We'll then say leaderstats dot cache dot value equals data1, or data, we're passing in the cache key, so this key must correspond to whatever this is. It must correspond to this name here. Then we'll say walls dot has desert dot value equals data2, or data has desert. Copy this, paste it in again, and this will be has winter, will be data3, and has winter in here. And then after the p call, we'll say if error message then, and then print out the error message as an error. Now we'll add a value to let the client know that the data is loaded. So to do this, we'll basically just insert a bool value. We don't even need to change the value. It only checks if it exists in the player. So we'll just say local data loaded equals instance.new bool value inside of the player. Then we'll just say data loaded dot name equals data loaded. We don't even need to set the value of it. Now when the player leaves, we'll just save the data. So player service.player removing connect function, passing in the player that's leaving, and we'll just save that data, passing in that player. And then we'll also do one for bind to close. So game bind to close function, and inside of this function, we'll loop for each player in the game for underscore comma player in pairs. Player service get players. Do player kick, which will call their player removing function and save their data. Then we can close all the scripts and hit test and play. Now you see when I go up to this desert here, if I touch the wall, it won't do anything. I can't go through it. If I collect all my points and get my 600 cash, I should now be able to walk through it and it will disappear. Perfect, and it takes my cash away. If I now stop and replay, the wall's still gone. I can now go into the next zone, and I'll just show you that the winter one also works. You also see the texts have been updated automatically. So I'll click my 3000 cash. So we know saving and loading works. I'll just show you that the winter portal works, and then what I'll do is boot up a local client or a local server with 2 clients. Here we go, the winter one works as well. So if I change this from test to server and clients and change this to 2 and hit play, I'll now get 2 clients. So now if I test this with 2 players, so I'll just collect 600 cash with this player. If I have player 2 facing the wall and player 1 actually buying it. Here we go, so just get 600 cash, and now you'll see that when player 1 buys the wall, it only disappears for the player and only the player can walk through it. If I now go up to it with player 2, I can't actually walk through it. So we know that the walls only work for each player, and the reason for that is the reason that we made the wall disappear in a local script is because then it will only disappear for that player. That's it for this video. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe as it really helps us out. You can also join our Discord server using the link in the description where you can get help with your games, share your games, and become part of a growing community of future developers. Like I say, I will have a video coming out in a few days on the GUI for this if you want to incorporate it. But if you're happy with just this, that's absolutely fine. Thanks for watching and goodbye.